Welcome to the Birding for Joy podcast, a show about discovering and exploring all the ways birding and wild birds bring joy into our lives. I'm Candi Lynn Fite, your gracious host and joyful birder. If you're curious about learning more about birding for joy, grab your favorite beverage, settle on your perch, and let's get into today's episode. Hello, birdiful friends. If you've listened to Birding for Joy before, welcome back. If this is your first time tuning in, I am so happy you're here. Today's episode is not a topic I had scheduled, and it's a bit off the cuff, so it might come away as more conversational than the other episodes here on the podcast. This past week, I was scrolling Instagram on the Birding for Joy account when I ran across a post from Spark Bird Project about best-selling author and avid birder Amy Tan, who had spoken at the Roger Tory Peterson Institute. The quote in the post from Amy Tan read, "You only have to love one bird to want to save all birds." I cannot begin to explain how much I resonated with Miss Tan's words. Then, a day later, the Spark Bird Project account posted a request for sharing Spark Bird stories with an animated owl. Seeing these two posts inspired this episode. Since I've been wanting to share my story with the Spark Bird Project for some time now, and this podcast is my preferred method of getting my message out into the world, I thought I'd utilize the platform. Some of you who have listened to the podcast might have heard parts of my Spark Bird story, but it wasn't until recently that I realized the impact that one tiny bird has had on my life. So grab a cup of tea, coffee, or glass of wine, settle on your perch, and let's get into the Spark Bird story that I will submit to the project. You only have to love one bird to want to save all birds. Amy Tan. My Spark Bird story is probably similar to other stories from fellow birders. I saw a really great bird, and I never looked back. While sitting on my back porch one day, a brilliant blue bird landed in a young red oak tree near me, belting out a cheerful canary-like tune. I followed the bird all morning with binoculars and a book on Texas birds that I'd located in my daughter's old bedroom. Needless to say, I was hooked. I spent hours searching the internet, learning all about the indigo bunting. I also spent all weekend watching birds with the old pair of hand-me-down binoculars. Although I still have a deep appreciation for the charming male indigo bunting who ignited my passion for wild birds, it's not the bird per se that led me to be the birder that I am today. It's what transpired after spotting him that transformed me from being a newbie birdwatcher to an avid birder with a purpose. 4 days later, I fell head over binoculars in love with a young barred owl. I stumbled upon him in the woods near my home while following the rapid DDD of what Merlin Bird ID app identified as a Carolina chickadee. The chickadee's calls were overpowered by a relentless screeching as I approached closer. Merlin couldn't decipher the screech, but I knew it had to be a bird. Moments later, I came eye to wide eye with a downy, feathered, fluffy owlet perched on a lower hanging limb about 20 feet away. Mesmerized, I stood watching the owl watching me. A quick Google search proved the young one to be a barred owl. I backed away slowly to a safer distance in case the owl parents were around, and sat down on the ground, observing the owlet's inquisitive, quirky behavior through my binoculars. Since determining the bird's sex was visually near impossible, I settled on a naive decision of it being a male. I returned the next evening, and the evening after that, for months. What began as a concern for the young owl's safety grew into a unique daily interaction. I was positively smitten with the owlet whom I named Chauncey, a name of English origin meaning lucky or fortunate. After several weeks of careful observation, I figured Chauncey, who'd learned to fly during that time, was either on his own or his parents and siblings were extremely good at hiding from me. Chauncey was anything but shy. Even after he began spending his days deeper inside the woods, upon my arrival at the edge of the forest, he'd swoop out and perch on a low-hanging post oak limb where I'd sit quietly not too far away and not too close, and observe him with binoculars. Despite my presence, Chauncey did normal owl things, such as preening, rotating its head to survey his surroundings, and occasionally dropping to the ground or flying to another tree close by, only to return with a squiggling lizard or buzzing cicada. He paid no interest in the silly squirrels that nested in the large oak tree, taunting him by scrambling from limb to limb near him. Once Chauncey started flying, he'd occasionally follow me home a few acres away and perch in a tree near my home, screeching for attention. I'd walk outside and tell him to go on home, and that until he found his hoot, he was too young to venture that far. We continued this routine for a couple more months, until one weekend when everything changed. The neighbors who owned the forest Chauncey lived in brought in a tractor and bulldozer, clearing and cutting. The following Monday evening, after the commotion was over, Chauncey didn't fly out to greet me at the forest edge, as he had done for nearly 3 months. After a week, I stopped looking for him, but I have never stopped wondering about him. What happened that weekend? Had the tractor and bulldozer frightened him? Was his habitat destroyed? Had he left the area? Or perhaps he merely realized owls and humans aren't supposed to be companions. I hope the latter is the case, and if so, I am glad he decided, because I'm not certain I would have found the willpower to say goodbye. These days, when I hear a barred owl hooting its signature "Who Cooks for You" call deep in the woods, I like to believe it's Chauncey and how he finally found his hoot. I think about how my experience with the young barred owl changed me in ways that I will forever be grateful for. It's made me a better birder and a better human. It's motivated me to learn everything I can about habitat loss and recovery, biodiversity conservation, the environment, and how to create change to help better support nature. In the most recent State of the Birds report, the findings show that the United States and Canada have lost 3 billion breeding birds since 1970. The findings prove we must act. Bird conservation will not only benefit the wild birds, but also other wildlife, humans, and the planet. Everything I do now here on my land and in the garden is done with wild birds in mind. From what I plant and what not to plant, to creating a bird-friendly habitat to keep the birds happy, safe, and healthy. I may only ever love one bird, but he sparked a desire to help save all the birds. Thank you so much for listening to my Spark Bird story. If you're not familiar with the Spark Bird Project, here is what their website states. The Spark Bird Project is designed to gather and share the stories of people's passion for birds while gaining scientific insights into a critical missing piece in the understanding of the ecology of birds, the birders themselves. If you or someone you know is interested in submitting your story to the research project, I'll drop the link to their website in the show notes. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, I wish you well and lots of joyful birding, my friends. If you are enjoying the Birding for Joy podcast, I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe to the show. Subscribing and tuning in to the episodes lets the algorithm on each platform know the podcast is providing you worthwhile content. It also helps ensure the success of the show. Remember, the absolute best way to support your favorite podcast is by word of mouth. So make sure to share Birding for Joy with others who might enjoy listening. That way we continue to build a joyful birding community. As always, thank you for tuning in and stay chirpy, my friends.